Hello there, this is Nick Roach and I'm creating this video for the channel Shiva at the Convenience Store. I quite like to create my videos outside, nice atmosphere and something else to watch other than me. But we are on a lake, we do have water birds and a bird feeder. We'll hear the noises, so hopefully it won't be too bad. Also it's evening, so there are little midges attracted to the lights. Hopefully we'll be alright. As I said, my name is Nick Roach. I've written 3 books. The first one was a how-to guide from my own path and experience, a process or method that I followed myself, called Enlightenment: The Simple Path. The second is a series of essays looking at philosophical questions, answering them from perspective as to my own experience, and that's called Essays in Truth: Glimpses into Reality. Quite a subtle title. And the most recent is my own autobiography, focusing on spiritual matters, entitled A Dream It May Be, But the Dream Goes On, referring to an early insight I had when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and everything else developed from there. My own journey has been slightly unusual from what I hear from other spiritual people, in that I did follow a set path, process, practice, and I'll be explaining that. And also it focused a lot on emotion. Excuse the bird. And for me, the emotion became so important to my own development, my own growth, that eventually emotion isn't just the reaction of something that happens in the physical environment, it is literally the energy creating the physical environment each and every moment. So it's a bit unusual. I've got some notes here, that's why I keep looking down. My journey started as a youngster, very unhappy emotionally due to various reasons. I was dyslexic but didn't know till I was nearly 40, and I had a very bad stammer as a result. Again, didn't know why. And I was also very empathic, sensing people's emotions, which messed me up a bit. So I had my own unhappiness, and when I was with other people I'd pick up on theirs. I would be at school, on the way to school on the underground for example, 17 years old, suddenly would feel really unhappy, a crowded carriage, and I would look around the room, the carriage, and I would know it was that lady over there I was feeling. Of course I couldn't approach her, 17-year-old little lad. What could I do? But everywhere I went, in any environment where there were other people, I would feel what they were feeling. I wouldn't know why, I couldn't read their minds. All I knew was that if they were unhappy, I would feel it. When I was in my late teens, I threw the gauntlet down to life. I'd had enough. There were these sayings, life's a bitch and then you die, that's life, life's unfair. And I wasn't going to take it anymore. And in my mind I said to life, either you show me there's a reason for this unhappiness or this pain, or I'm out of here. I'm not living like this for another 60 years for no reason. But I knew I could take any amount of unhappiness if there was a reason for it. I just had to know what that was. I had a psychic reading with a chap at the College of Psychic Studies in London who said to me, well, I actually walked in there and I'd made the decision, if the psychic can't tell me life's got a purpose, I'm out of here. Literally, I'm going to end it straight after this. Visit my friends and family one more time and I'm gone. If a psychic doesn't know, then no one knows. And this chap didn't know this about me, but he said, the reason you're struggling so much is you're already on a fairly very high spiritual level, and you can't control the energy. And if you follow the spiritual path, you'll progress very quickly. But you don't have to do it. And I had the energy bumbling inside me. It was quite incredible. I said, yes I do, yes I do. He said, no you don't. I said, yes I do. I have to do this. I spent a year practicing. I attended a spiritual awareness course at the college, one morning a week for 11 weeks, shortly after that. And that was to do with visualization, meditation, and analysing one's thoughts, where they come from. And I was at college doing my psychology and sociology A-levels soon after that. And I remember going back home to my parents after college one day, sitting on the sofa in the house on my own, because of course my mum and stepdad were out working. I was 18 years old. I was sitting on the sofa, television wasn't on, no music, just sitting there waiting for the next thought so I could analyse where it came from. And then I realised I'd got as far as I could with that method. And I just said the words out loud to the four walls, I need a master. Didn't really even know what that was. I'd read various spiritual books over the previous year or so looking for answers, but I didn't know what a master was. But in that same moment I remembered a book I'd bought a year earlier, one of the many, by a Western teacher by the name of Barry Long, and I knew exactly where it was. I ran to my room, opened the bottom drawer with all these spiritual books in, and paranormal and new age stuff. I never read any of them really, just kept buying them thinking, oh that's not it. But I went to the drawer, opened it, and straight away snatched this book, Stillness is the Way. Just a white book with this. That's all that was written on the cover, no other picture. And I sat there and started reading, and it was a transcript of a meeting Barry held in a friend's loft. I forget if it was 3 or 5 friends were there at the time, and it was a transcript for 3 days of him telling them, feel that, don't move. Are you aware you moved? You felt you moved then? Did you see yourself look over there? Did you acknowledge that? Are you aware of this? All the time focusing, are you aware, are you aware, are you aware? And to me this was incredible, absolutely incredible. Something clicked. In the back of the book was a card. For more information, ring this number. So I rung up and ordered 2 audio cassettes. Received those with information of a talk Barry was giving in Earl's Court. So I straight away booked a couple of weeks later to go on the Sunday, and it was amazing. And while I was there, they spoke about a 5-day residential seminar up at Leicester University taking place a few weeks later. So straight away I booked onto that. I was a care assistant at the time, not earning big money, but I'd been saving. So my boss agreed the time off. So at the 5-day seminar, that was amazing too. I'll describe some of the things that I experienced, or the teaching. But while I was there, they said they were about to hold the first ever master session 2 weeks or so with Barry Long in Australia. A seminar for 2.5 weeks or so. And I went back to work the next day, told my boss, and she said, well, yes, go on, have your holiday. So straight away I booked onto that. So moved very fast. And while I was there, it was amazing. Absolutely. The essence of the teaching was to hold on to this knowledge, the I am, the stillness, the awareness, at all times. But particularly when emotion comes up, And when one is emotional, one has a choice, if one's quick enough. Otherwise there is no choice. But let's say there's a choice. Go into the imagination and think about the problem, or stay with the stillness and feel the emotion and not think about the problem. Just hold the knowledge. And what I learned is that the emotion cannot survive in conscious awareness. It literally is dissolved, or the unconscious emotion is made conscious, the energy is reabsorbed, however one wants to say it or explain it. The emotion gets dissolved through consciously holding it. And being very unhappy and looking to end the unhappiness, this worked for me very quickly. I was having insights and realizations, experiences very, very quickly. An early one was when I was in my early 20s, and finally, for me, had the insight I mentioned, which led to the title of the autobiography. I had been considering for a little while the analogy of everything being a dream, and I'd sent a letter to Barry asking, is this one person's dream the only one here? I'll mention now I had an insight on LSD a little while earlier, or a couple of years earlier, that had probably brought this about, but it planted a seed. But anyway, here we are, a while later, and it seemed like it might be correct. So I sent this letter to Barry, and I was a care assistant by this time, but now working in an agency, so I was quite flexible with my working. And a few days later, I received a letter from Barry. It was early morning, and the letter said, yes, it's a dream, Nick. The dreamer's dream, the only one here. And when all need of the dream has been satisfied, the dreamer wakes up. Well done, Nick, keep going. And although I had asked the question, I wasn't prepared for the effect of the answer, because until he'd confirmed it, there was still an element of me being able to put it to one side. But reading this letter, the full implication of what this meant came over me. I'm alone. This is a dream, one person's dream, my dream, and I am alone in this dream environment. This is all dreamt, and I have no escape, nowhere to go. Now, one could say, well, if you know it's a dream, you could commit suicide, and that is true. However, Barry had already taught that the emotion which is not made conscious in the life gets left behind when the individual dies, and another life is created to continue dissolving it. So I knew that if I was to end it intentionally, the emotion would create another dream, and I may not know it's a dream then. Saying I, people who know about spiritual stuff would be saying, well, who's the I then? But talking about how I was when I was in my early 20s, new to all this stuff, knew nothing about who's I, who's listening, who's asking the question, that stuff. It was just me and a normal person with the emotions. So the emotion would have been left behind, another life would be carried on, and I would have to do this all over again, was the thinking behind that. So I thought, well, I can't end it myself, I have to live with this. I have to put up and endure this, whatever it is, this nightmare that I was stuck in, until it ended. Now, working for an agency, my shifts were flexible, like I said, and for the next 3 days I actually had no shifts as it worked out, which is good, because I spent 3 days after that sitting on the sofa in my dressing gown with the letter, staring at the four walls, no telly on, no radio, in total shock. What's the point of doing anything? What's the point of getting dressed? If it's all a dream, nothing's real, and I'm all alone, there's no point, is there? I just sat there, but doing as Barry had taught, holding the emotion. Just holding it there. And after, on the third day, these words came from inside me. A dream it may be, but the dream goes on. And I knew then, dream or not, this has to be lived. I can't withdraw and abstain from living just because I know it's not real. I've still got to get on with it. And enough emotion had been dissolved by then that I was in a place to do that. And it so happens, on that third day in the evening, I did have a night shift to go to. So I got dressed and off I went the rest of my life. Now, shortly after that, I started to write my experiences and realizations down. Every insight, and there were a lot of them. And I actually ended up continuing to do that for the next 20 years. Not knowing how long it would take for them to be put into a book, but that is in the end how long it took. So my autobiography is largely consists of my notes, written experiences as I was going through them for all those years. It was quite tough. I was very, very unhappy. I was in a relationship at the time which was tough going, emotionally. And I moved out of the lady's house 3 times in the first year, but I kept having the knowledge, I have to go back, I have to go back. I don't know why, but I have to go back. It's not finished yet. And I'd go back, but the third time I said, I'm never leaving again and going back. Next time I'm leaving for good. But this relationship it was 9 years in the end, forced me to go through a lot of my own emotion. Now the lady in question was extremely emotional, her moods would go up and down all the time. Now I was unhappy at the time, very needy, needing to be loved and acknowledged. The emotion needed it. And with her moods, the emotion ups and downs, I was also very empathic. So whenever she was happy, I was all exhilarated and enjoying the excitement, the happiness, and as soon as her moods changed and she came down, it was like thud. A weight being dropped on me and like a stone, and I was in the same mood and despair she was in. And so I would every time hold the emotion in myself, dissolving it as I knew how to do, especially as there was not much to think about because nothing had gone wrong in my life, it was just her moods. But what I found over time is, even though her moods continued to go up and down as they always had, my reaction to them was getting less and less. So whereas before, originally we were going up and down together, every time she went up I did, eventually she's going up and down like this and I'm moving much to a shallower level. When she'd be excited, I would get a little bit pleased, but I'd know this isn't going to last. I would just hold the stillness. Then when she'd be unhappy, bad mood, angry, it wouldn't affect me as much because it won't last. I would just hold the stillness, hold the space. And eventually, whatever she did, I stayed the same. Didn't matter. Not because I wasn't feeling, but I was totally aware and still, connected to my own being, wasn't needing any emotional confirmation, any emotional feedback from her anymore. I had my own space. What I learnt in hindsight is that when one is empathic, the mind tells you you're feeling somebody else's emotion. Bird squawking. And to an extent that is the case. However, because everything is connected, everything is one, and one realises one's own nature, one's own being is that. when I was unhappy because of her mood, while I was indeed feeling it as a result of her feeling that, she was putting me in touch with a bit of my own unhappiness that I wouldn't have otherwise been consciously in touch with. She was reflecting to me some of my own unhappiness hidden deep down inside me. Some people call it the pain body, the emotional rucksack we carry on us every time we're unhappy, and it gets heavier and heavier. Putting me in touch with that. So by dissolving it in me, I was dissolving the emotion in myself as a result of her reflecting it to me. It's exactly what one does when something goes wrong in life, except nothing had to go wrong. She purely got in a bad mood, and I was in touch with my own unhappiness. So during those 9 years, I went initially to Paula Barry's meetings when I was of the age of 18, when he came to the UK, both at Earl's Court and at Leicester University, so for several years. I got together with this lady when I was 21 years old, and we went together for a little while. After a couple of years, she said to me after one meeting, "I don't know why we're here. He hasn't said anything in the last 2 hours that you haven't already told me." But I knew it was about the energy and the being, not just about the information. I was getting the information very quickly, the knowledge. I understood the concept, the logic. It was very simple, very direct. I was doing it, I knew. But there's more to it than just knowing how it works. There is the being of it. So after the first master session in Australia, while I was there actually, another experience, I got together with a lady there, and both of us were trying to do this as much as we could, be conscious. And that is the way when you have two people in a relationship, they can start pointing out emotion at each other. One sees the other's emotional and points it out, the other goes, "Well, you're emotional." And it's very difficult. And so I was having to put myself through this stringent vice, holding my mind all the time, trying to dissolve this emotion that kept coming up. And after several days of this, I remember one evening walking out of the campsite where we were staying, over the road to the beach, and sitting on the beach, feeling the insides of me were wanting to die, longing to die. Not me, I was fine, I was watching it, but the emotion was longing to die. I'd given it such a battering the previous few days, all day, it couldn't take it. So again I started to learn the emotion is actually almost a separate entity, a separate being from the stillness that I am. So the separation was already happening. But I was able to see it's working. But there were just so many experiences, so many insights and realizations. I'm trying to remember a few major ones. There was one a few years later where I was with friends at a holiday park watching, a bit colder isn't it, about 6 degrees tonight, got a big jersey on, watching a show on stage, and all of a sudden there was no sense of me. There was the screen of perception, the screen of everything occurring in front of me, and there was no perceiver. And I understood then when they say the perceiver and the perceived becoming one, at that moment the experience was to me, that's because there is no perceiver. The perceived, what is, gives the impression that I must be over here, because that's over there. But actually, for those, I don't know, it might be 30 seconds, I don't know how long it lasted, a minute, there was nothing here, there was only what was perceived. When I got to about in my late 20s, I'd now moved on from this lady. Again, it wasn't serving me anymore because I wasn't reacting to anything of her moods, and I knew it was time now. I was able to move on, and I went back to Australia for the penultimate and the last, but the penultimate master session in Australia with Barry Long. I hadn't been for quite a few years because Barry stopped coming to England, due to health reasons, and although I was receiving his audio cassette still, I wasn't going to him, but I was doing a lot of work all day, every day, struggling and fighting. I knew what I was doing, but I also knew I needed to go back to get the energy, to get the being. But a few days, a week or so before going to the penultimate master session, I woke up one morning, getting ready to go to work. I was in debt collection at the time, car finance of all things, persuading people to voluntarily hand their cars back or repossessing them. There you go. We do all sorts. Had lots of sales jobs as well. Commission only, quite stressful, door-to-door sales, and anyway. This morning I was getting ready and I felt in my stillness a centre point. There was a definite point, I don't remember where it was now, but tangible centre in my being that made it very easy to hold on to. That's strange. Expected at any moment to disappear. I'm getting ready for work, getting dressed, get in the car, drive up around London and a bit up where I was going, about an hour and a bit's drive, and all the time feeling the centre point inside me expanding slightly. It was there all by lunchtime. It was still there, but it had half filled my spatial awareness inside this centre point. By the end of the day, it had reached the outer edges of what appeared to be my environment, my experiential being, and then by the time it was time to go to bed, it had gone. But it had filled me, and whatever that was that expanded, it then remained as a solid foothold. Whether it wasn't the point expanding, it was the remainder of the emotion at that time being cleaned out in order to expose what was there, the stillness, which made more sense. But after that, it was, I'll say, easy. The feet holding on to the sense of stillness was always there as a background. After that, it was there all the time as a background. I went to the master session that year, and the experiences of the 2 years get a bit mixed up, actually, of the 2 master sessions. It's all in the book, which order happened. But at one of the years, I was writing a letter in my room after the meeting one evening. Writing a letter to Barry, describing actually that I'd had the knowledge the Lord was entering me. Now, I've never used the word myself, and don't think I've used it since really, or before, but Barry talked about the Lord is when, for men, often they realise truth and love separately. Truth as in understanding where everything works from a self-knowledge perspective, and love as in a feeling connection and one with everything, a relationship. Because I had all the information, I knew it all from my own self-knowledge, experience, insights, but I was quite unhappy still, quite alone. But here I am in my room, in my boxer shorts I think and a t-shirt, sitting there writing to Barry that I'd had the knowledge of the Lord entering me. And it coincided with me meeting a lady. Actually was quite similar to the lady I met in the very first master session, as life would have it, and we were sort of getting friendly, getting to know each other, and she didn't live even that far from me, and it seemed a possibility we might get together. And the Lord being love, the energy of love, the consciousness, the relationship, not just as information but as relationship with environment, that was what was happening. And I was writing this, but as I'm writing it, on the wall behind me, the room wasn't very big, I suddenly became aware of an energy vortex on the wall behind me. I don't know, it filled the wall, the big circle, cold energy, bristling, intense potential of pure. It was incredible, absolutely incredible. And the question was, am I ready to die? Am I ready to die? And I remember Barry Long saying he was asked in his journey 3 times psychically if he's ready to die. But I was asked, am I ready to die? All I had to say is yes internally, and I'd be gone and be one with this pure energy, I'd be gone. And of course this is what I've been waiting for all these years, ever since I learned about this, had the insight when I was early 20s about it being a dream. I'd longing to get to a point when I could end this nightmare, end this dream, wake up and get out. And here this thing is, asking me, are you ready to go now? The doorway was open. It was offering, it was asking, come on, if you want to go, come on, just say yes and you'll be gone. Now's your time. Just say yes, go on. Just say yes. And I'm sitting there, as I said, boxer shorts and t-shirt with a pen in my hand, just staring at this terrific, terrifying, shocking, amazing potential. But it was so cold, bristling cold. It was incredible. I keep saying that, I'm sorry, but what to do? If it asked me a couple of days earlier, probably it would be, yeah, gone. Because asking me now, when I've just met this lady, have knowledge the Lord was entering me, the love, the aspect of beingness, which is love. And life perhaps was about to get better, finally start to enjoy life. Because they've been pretty tough till then. As I'm thinking this, I wasn't rushed. It wasn't rushing me. I just had to make a decision. And finally I said to myself quietly, if I'm allowed to stay and enjoy this place, I'd like to do that. And with that, it was gone. And it was getting late then, so I went to bed, turned out the light and lay there, and I felt like a fallen angel, an angel that had left heaven and been offered to go back to heaven, and I've gone, no thanks, I'd rather stay here, I don't want to go back. And I thought, what have I done? Have I done the most horrific, awful, unforgivable thing one can ever do? I've said no to going back to the pure being. But then the thought occurred to me, maybe that's what the whole life's about. I'd had coming up to 30 years of unhappiness, hated this place, hated it. Just so unhappy, couldn't wait to end it and end the emotional unhappiness and get out. And maybe the whole of it was to get me to a point of actually, despite all that, choosing to stay. Maybe that was the point of the whole lot. And maybe it asked me if I was ready to die, although the doorway was, as far as I was concerned, genuinely open. It was only open then because I wasn't going to go through it. I wasn't going to say yes. And maybe I was thinking, maybe this was the whole point, to get me to a point of not wanting to leave, but to be happy to stay. Then I thought, okay, if that's the case, maybe tomorrow I won't wake up again. Maybe tomorrow there doesn't need to be a tomorrow, because this was the one lesson. And there's no need for tomorrow. It's all over. So I shut my eyes and went to sleep, not knowing I was going to wake up the next day. And I did. Woke up early, didn't set an alarm, but I woke up early and I went for a walk. But it was the first day in my entire life that I was here because I had chosen to be here. and I went for a walk through the university campus down to the massive lake, and everything was here, everything was here for me. The whole place was here for me. As I walked down to the lake, up in the birch tree were 2 lorikeets. I said, they're here for me. Again, excuse the noise, hope it's alright in the video. I got wrapped down to the lake and walked along, and there was an outlet inlet connection to the sea some distance off, so small fish could get through it. And in the shallows not far from me was this stingray, vast stingray, vast by my standards, looked pretty big, in the shallows, swimming along next to me. And I said, that's here for me. The trees are here for me. This is all here for me. And then I knew Barry Long himself is here for me. This is my own. This is all here for me. A little while after that, again in Australia, I was starting to speak with people. They're coming to me, asking me questions, just in chatting, as people do, just chatting. But obviously I had some knowledge and some experiences. And sitting on the beach, on the side of a beach one evening, on a bench, talking with a lady, just talking, suddenly there was a slight shift, and I was aware that I was speaking with myself in another place. Her appearance didn't change, didn't look like me, but she was me. She was my essence. I was speaking with me, my own reflection. I looked down, and the bench was my reflection. That was me too. The ground, the buildings one side, the trees, the beach, the water, the sky, the seagulls on the beach, everything was my own reflection. This was all me. Now by this time I dissolved so much emotion that the shift was only small. A small shift of perception, and we just carried on talking as if nothing happened, but it was quite major, the shift. And it came and went a few times. I think it came and went over the next few days occasionally. And then it was gone. And this was actually, or that what happened, the very last master session that ever happened. And I believe the last teaching that Barry Long did. When I got back to England, I was walking the dog one evening. I had a little King Charles Spaniel then, just walking around the field, and I felt, now it's ready, I'm ready to start teaching. But I thought, Barry keeps talking about the master, being the master, what does that mean? And I saw, to be the master, you can say it's to be the master of your own mind, but to me the master at that time came to be the master consciousness, to be the only one here. I wrote to Barry saying I was looking to begin teaching, and he'd always insisted, A, you can't be enlightened at 30, it doesn't happen, and I was 30 exactly, and you shouldn't start teaching till you're actually ready. He kept referring all these years to these phony masters, they just talk nonsense and confuse you. And anyway, I wrote to him, and he wrote back kindly saying, your qualifications to serve by teaching the people are well founded. There you go, Nick. Or on you go. Now by the time I got his reply, I'd started teaching a little class at work, put posters up around the room, and that was how Sally and I met, my partner Sally. Now you'd think that was the end of the story. I hoped it would be, because I was calling myself enlightened, having had all these experiences. There's so many more, I forget now, but all these experiences, amazing, and I knew about how the life worked, how the emotions worked, I knew it all. But amazingly, and I was in a good relationship. Amazingly, life was still difficult. My work situation was difficult, and it continued to be difficult for another 7-8 years after this. Again, it's all in the book, explaining how and why, what happened, and everything coming out. With Sally and I, we set up the website. Birds are getting noisy, sorry. We set up the website, and then I'm giving little talks, holistic shows. Then I wrote the first book, and then from the website, which was really big then, we took everything off pretty much and put it into the second book. Hence, it's a series of essays, because I had each been written independently, and a few extra bits. And then carried on with life and living. And it wasn't till several years later that I actually had an email from someone. I said to Sally in the morning, before we're getting ready for work, I said to Sally, sorry, it's one of the coots, I think, and they're very loud. I said to Sally, I feel like I've had enough. I've just had enough. And I think on the same exact morning, I'd opened an email before we left for work, and a chap said, "You've done quite well, Nick. We haven't got as far as this lady." And he sent me a link to an interview with Bernadette Roberts, a lady who talks about no self, the self, having no self. And I read the interview, and I knew something was happening. This was together. This was happening. This felt right. But then I thought to myself, okay, well, how do I dissolve myself? Because I dissolved everything. That's my path, dissolving, being conscious and dissolving stuff. How do I dissolve it? And for the next few days, I was holding on to the sense of being I had, just holding it, as I'd done my whole life, and it wasn't going anywhere. And I saw holding on to it is not the way to let go of this one this time. This time I had to let go of it. So I, one night, lying in bed, in the dark, put my awareness off the centre which I was always automatically held without even trying all these years, for the last 8 years, just connected with it automatically. Put my attention just off it, and it disappeared. Put my attention back and it was there again, but then I knew what I was looking for, and the next day I did it again, held it. When I went back, it wasn't there, and the centre had gone. My centre had gone, and that marked the new phase in my life. I hadn't had a new experience for about 8 years during the difficult times after sort of writing the first books, but it had been emotionally difficult still. I knew what was happening. I knew my emotion was creating everything. I was responsible for everything that happened in my life, but I still had to go through it. Life was perfect, but it still was uncomfortable. And suddenly, with this shift and the centre disappearing, again there were various experiences which I forget them all in detail now, and I've given you enough information. I think I don't want to bore you too much, but one of the things that did happen is that experience from Australia, where that lady and everything became my own reflection, that came back. And that came back as a constant experience, not a temporary one, a permanent one, that everything that I experienced was my own reflection. Everything that is me. So I was then, in effect, walking around in a lucid dream. I was still at work, doing my job for a local authority, working with contractors and the public and councillors, and still doing what I do. But everything was my reflection of my own being. And at the same time, suddenly things started to get easier. Life became more flowing, more gentle. Things began to fall into place. And over the next 3 or 4 years, all the difficulties left. But it started with that centre disappearing. And at the end of the autobiography, which I published the end of 2016, that had got me up to the point where I used the words, I was immersed in self, as in the big S, higher self. Immersed in self. It was all encompassing, all being, all, immersed in self. Higher self, not emotional self. So that almost brings us up to date, because then a few months ago, early 2017, 2 more experiences happened, and I've put videos of them on my channel. One, I connected with the emotional attachment to the moment itself. Don't worry about that, but it happened. I described it. And the other one is the awareness, the bit that's aware, and the occurrence, the happening, merged to become one and the same. The dream and the dreamer became one and the same. So whereas before I was saying I was awake in my dream, awake in this dream, I was dreaming, it's walking around, although that could still be said, it still applies, the experience is beyond that now, because the dream and the dreamer are one and the same. So if someone asks, well, who's dreaming it? Well, the dream is occurring, the dream is its own. There isn't anything separate from the dream, except the being behind it all, where there is no experience. There's just pure being. So the dream and the dreamer are one and the same. So that's my story. So I do teach this now. It starts when I'm talking to someone, connecting them with the space of I am. The stillness, the awareness reflects on itself. Because normally people are in their emotional thinking, imagination. So we need to put a bit of a pause in that and connect within stillness. It might start with the breathing to give the mind something to focus on, like an anchor, and feeling the body, and then one's aware. And the point is to do that all day, every day, as much as you can. Keep coming back all day, all day, all day. You might only come back 3 times in the first day, or even once a day. It doesn't matter, as long as you do it and hold on. That's the point, because that is starting to break the overall momentum, the mind all the time. Just put in the pause. But then the biggest part is this emotion, you see. And this is what I learned, and it's vast. It's vast. The emotion which we feel here when we're upset or angry or frightened or worried, that emotional energy as a feeling has its origin deep down in the being or the mind creating this. And that is what is creating the external environment every single moment. The emotion is the rough, coarse end of the very energy that's creating the separation. And I'm aware this puts me apart from at least the spiritual people who I normally am in contact with, because this is completely alien to them. No matter how enlightened they are, this is alien to them. And I have to assume that's because they never had to do it. Why would they know about something that's not in their life experience? If they never had to do it, they never had to do it. Why would they need to know about it? But for me, when there's something happens that's uncomfortable in the world, and the emotion comes up and reacts, I know that emotion which I'm feeling is the same emotion that created and is creating the external situation. Because everything is one. Everything is connected, as within, so without. It's all there. And so if I hold, in my conscious awareness, hold the emotion, I'm not just dissolving the emotion, the feeling, but I'm also dissolving the energy that is creating the situation outside. So every time I do this, I become more emotionally aware, more conscious, less emotional, and the situation outside, my life, external circumstances, get better and better and better, because I'm dissolving the energy of both. And as one learns to do this, whereas before the emotion might come up and it's a little while before one snaps out of it and comes back, and then one tries to dissolve it, but it's really hard, and keep losing it, then coming back. As one does it, one gets there faster and faster and faster, till eventually one is conscious all the time. Even before the emotion arises to do with a problem, I, the person, am already there. And the emotion comes up, and I'm already there, and it's exposed and dissolved very quickly. And I'm still there. So I no longer get absorbed and lost into anything, because I'm already conscious and aware. And of course the emotion is what's driving the thinking mind as well. People can meditate for years and years and years and thinking, why can't I be conscious? Why can't I stop this? Why can't I be present in the moment all the time? But then they don't want to worry about the emotion. It's the emotion in the psyche, in the unconscious, the emotional attachments, the pain body, as some teachers call it. Therapists call it some say the rucksack of emotion we're carrying it around with us every time we get unhappy, put the rock in it. This is all old common stuff. There's nothing new here. Every time we get emotional unhappy, we're getting it bigger and bigger in the unconscious, the weight of emotion we're carrying around with us. And every time we get unhappy, this emotion comes up and reacts again, because it's reminded us or connected with some emotion from 30 years ago. It happens. We know it happens. So when the emotion comes up now, and I'm conscious, I dissolve it. I'm dissolving not just the emotion in the current moment, but the emotion connected to it from the past as well. So every moment a situation happens, I dissolve the emotion, I'm dissolving the situation, I'm dissolving the emotion going back however long connected to that karma, which is what it is. It's the karma is the past repeating itself. We've said that. We said that. But the past is emotional attachment. It's this emotional energy, for want of a better term, which has not been made conscious. So the situation keeps happening again and again and again. The emotion keeps coming up to be made conscious in a similar situation, but we don't do it. We instead go into it unhappy and think and worry, and that feeds the emotion, and we're just storing it, getting bigger and bigger, and the karma is just still waiting to be faced. When the emotion comes up, instead by making it conscious, I become more conscious, more aware, more awake, more enlightened. Every single time I dissolve the emotion. And by doing this, I'm not just dissolving the emotion, the sense of being, as I said, so I become more aware, and the sense of separation is being dissolved all the time, because the emotional which is dissolving, which is the separation, I'm not just dissolving that, but dissolving the outside environment as well. So eventually there's no separation between me and what's happening. They're one and the same. There's just this. I've dissolved so much emotion, so much attachment to being separate, to ideas and thoughts and beliefs and opinions, and dissolved so much attachment to hurts and pains and worries about the past and future. That's all been dissolved, all been made conscious, and what's left is this. A couple of questions I made a note of that people sometimes ask about free will, for example, one that came up recently. To me, if we say this is one being, one mind, free will is purely the will, the energy, the movement to be separate, to be free. And that is the same as emotion, is the need to experience within the one mind creates the environment of separation. And so to me, free will and emotional attachment are one and the same. They're just different names and the same thing being viewed from a different angle. Free will is the movement to be free and separate. Emotion is what we feel as a result of the energy creating the separation. And they are the same thing. So to me, when I read on a question recently, someone asked, do we have free will? And I replied, I am free will. This experience of separation here, this, which is emotion to me, it's all emotion, in form, it's all emotion, all separation, it's all emotion. Just we can't feel it doesn't mean it's not created by the emotion, the attachment to being separate. This is the result of the free will. In the one mind, its need to experience within the being is creating this life. This is the embodiment of free will itself. Which is not the same, of course, as thinking, have I got free will separate from the table? Or separate from the chair? No, I haven't. Because there is no separate self in that sense. There's pure being and mind, and there's the attachment, the need to experience emotional energy, whatever you want to call it, that's creating everything else. And that is driving forward all the time. And that is expressing itself, experiencing itself, which is, you could call it free will, emotional energy, whatever one wants to call it. It exists, but just not in the way that we think. We've been gone nearly an hour now, so I'm trying to get through the last two. Don't want to go on too long. People have asked me about love. What is love compared with emotional attachment? And of course they are different. Emotional attachments are when we want, need, if we can't have what we want, we get upset, worried, frightened, looking forward to something, looking forward to being with somebody. This is attachment, this is emotional needing. Now what happens with love, as I understand it and I experience it, is that when I'm with someone who I love, even if I've just met them, they are reflecting, because everything's one's own reflection, I've said that, they are reflecting to me a bit of my own being, my own awareness, which I've not yet realised. So when one loves someone, one feels complete, at least more complete, but feels complete because they're reflecting to them a bit they don't normally feel in contact and connection with. And that's why when the person leaves them and goes away, they feel a bit missing. They feel incomplete. They no longer have that reflection for their own being. What then happens normally is we think about the person, so now we've let go of the centre completely. We're in the imagination, thinking, remembering, looking forward to the person, being with them again, and now we're in an emotional world feeding the emotion. We've already said about the pain body or the rucksack carrying around with us, we're now feeding that. So what's originally a pure love of them connecting us with the one space, the one being which we are, has become an emotional mess. Now instead of this, when we're with someone we love, if we hold the stillness, the awareness, we are in contact, in conscious connection with the bit of awareness they're reflecting to us. And when the person then goes off to do something else, goes to work, whatever, we're not with them, if we stay in that point of awareness, contact with the I am, the stillness, we are actually still in contact with that sense of love of them. The bit they reflect to us, it is now exposed and we can hold it. So we become more conscious, more aware, and we grow in love through holding the stillness that when we love someone. We don't become more emotional. Emotion, the ups and downs, the wanting, the selfishness, the accusations, the neediness, that's not love. Love is the complete awareness, the stillness, the being, acknowledgement, appreciation. It doesn't have the opposites. It doesn't have the ups and downs. So that's love. And that's why, of course, an enlightened person is said to be in a state of love all the time. It's not love as in a gushy, needy, wanty. It's just stillness, where everything is reflecting my own being back to me. My own sense of stillness, my own sense of I is this. Is all me, and I'm complete and whole. I'm not separate. I have a body, and that is separate physically, but in the experience inside, I am this. I'm not separate. So I'll just say what happens next is, I don't know. To round this off, I don't know what happens next. At the end of the autobiography I wrote, the last chapter was what's next, and I said it'll probably go stiller and finer. So another bird squawking, stiller and finer and finer. But I didn't know that I would connect with the origin of the environment, the attachment to being separate, to being in the moment. I didn't know that would happen, and I certainly didn't know that the dream and the dreamer, the awareness and happening, would become one and the same. I didn't know that then. So there will be people out there who are beyond where I am, and if they follow the same sort of path and route, will probably know what I've got coming next. And in tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, I might know, if there's anything else. Of course, because the stillness, the being, the awareness goes deeper and deeper, because to me what's happening, although I would say I'm in the moment now, this is it, there to me is still emotional attachment to being separate. The original movement to experience something which creates the body and the physical world is still here. Look, the need to be something and to be separate is still here. So obviously it isn't finished. Not all the emotion has been dissolved and made conscious. Not all the karma, if you want to use the word karma, has been made conscious. Not all the free will, need to be separate, has been dissolved. So that still has to go on. Now, what is entailed in that, what's going to happen next, whether it's simply from now on it just becomes stiller and stiller and stiller, or whether some new insight experience will happen, I don't know, it doesn't matter. But the process is the same. I'm conscious, living life, and at any moment a situation might happen that raises ever so slight something inside, and the emotion then dissolves, and I've just got slightly more conscious and more aware because of it. Thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. Again, my name's Nick Roach, and feel free to contact me and ask me any questions. Thank you very much.